Video is for those students who are not going to be in the building for these next 2 days this week. That is Tuesday and Thursday. You're at home for whatever reason you're at home for. Watch this whole video because this is going to give you information on the lectures that you're going to be missing in class. I'm going to give you kind of like the rough, basic bones of these lectures. You're not going to get the pomp and the parade and the salt and the pepper with it. You're just going to get the basics. But here's the deal. If you're at home, you have stuff to do. You have still a quiz to prepare for and a test to prepare for, which you'll be taking online next week. It's going to happen. You're going to have to do it. So this week, if you're at home, you need to get that study guide done by Friday. So you should be looking at the lectures I've been sending you. You should be looking at the notes that are online. You should get that study guide done. You should also be doing all the remote assignments. There are 2 remote assignments from last week, and there's going to be 3 remote assignments from this week. So get on top of those. Tomorrow's remote assignment, I'm doing this on Sunday, so Monday's remote assignment is going to be 5 videos that you watch, you answer questions, you send them in. Wednesday's and Friday's remote assignment is 1 documentary called The Christmas Truce, which is a thing I sent you guys out a while ago, which I'll send out again. It's 40 minutes long, and so I'm giving you 2 days to watch it and to answer, or actually to write a 3-paragraph summary on that video. It's 3 paragraphs, 5 sentences a piece. Plus, you have a study guide due on Friday. So you need to get all that done. And since you're at home, there's no reason why you can't get all that done in this week at all. There's no reason if you're here to not get all that done. Plus, you need to prepare for these quizzes and tests. And you need to be watching these videos, or this video I'm sending out, that's going to be the lectures that you're going to be missing while you're in class. So let's get at it. What we're talking about is supporting the war. This is how do we get America to support the war? Because we get involved after the Zimmerman telegram, that bad note that Germany tries to send to Mexico and get Mexico into the war, and they're going to come over here and help them get lands back from us. And this makes America go, I don't think so. So we get involved in the war. So how do we get this? Well, first, the Selective Service Act. The Selective Service Act is basically a draft. For those people who don't know what a draft is, it means if they call your name to go to war, you're going to war. Like, there's no way around it. You're going to war. Now, if you have some sort of ailment, if you're missing a foot or something like that, then maybe you get out of it. But generally speaking, they call your name. You're suiting up. You're going over there. But how do you pay for this? And this is important. Write this down. Underline it. Circle it. Liberty bonds. Liberty bonds is what you can buy that will actually help support the war financially. And there is a huge propaganda. And propaganda, it works both ways. Propaganda can be good for like the sense to get something that you need to get passed by a country, and also can be used to denigrate and be like discriminatory against a group of people. It just depends. This propaganda was like, we have to be in part of this war, and I'm going to show you a bunch of political cartoons that show you that piece of propaganda there. But Liberty bonds, write it down. This is what funded the war. Other than Liberty bonds, the government takes over pretty much all businesses, at least manufacturing businesses, farming businesses and other manufacturing, they take over. Similar to like the Civil War, and this is to make sure everybody's on the same page and we're producing enough stuff to supply our soldiers across the Atlantic. That's the goal there. And the next thing, you write this down, is the Lever Food, Fuel, and Control Act. The Lever Food, Fuel, and Control Act is basically a certain amount of food and fuel you can use in your household. And that's it. No more than just this select amount. Why? Because that food and fuel needs to go overseas to help our troops. So everybody at home is also kind of, buckling that belt a little bit closer. Everyone back home is just preparing to eat less, to use less, because they need to, all of us need to be part of this fight overseas. So those are the first 2 things definitely write down. And that is the Liberty Bonds and the Lever Food, Fuel, and Control Act. 2 important laws that you need to know about. First stuff the government does to kind of push the agenda to get to World War I. I mean, after the Zimmerman telegram, everyone's pretty much on board anyway, but this is to get those last dragons, just get like a full effort from America to go into war and support the war. One, there is this push in propaganda, and I'm going to show you again, I'll show you political cartoons later of all this type of propaganda pieces, but there's these people called 4-minute men. These 4-minute men are basically people that can go into a scenario, give a quick 4-minute speech, in, out, make sure that they get the point across. They used to put things in these film reels that people would watch to try to get them to support the war. This is a full effort to get people focused on the war. Also, this is like the other side of the coin, it's the prevention of people speaking out against the war. So there's the Sedition Act. You can't talk bad about the government. Matter of fact, if you do talk bad about the government, you go to jail. There's actually a person who goes to jail and actually runs a political campaign through jail, and he wins like 100,000 votes. He still loses the election, but go him. The Espionage Act. You can't interfere with the draft. You actually can't interfere with any kind of war effort that the government deems as interference, and otherwise going to jail. The Schenck versus U.S. It talks about these ideas of restraining liberties. The whole idea that you can't shout fire in a crowded theater, even though that's against your freedom of speech, comes from this Schenck versus U.S. Schenck versus U.S. is basically a Supreme Court decision that says that your rights end at somebody else's impediment, somebody else's negative result. The American League also is going to be something that comes in here. This is a group of people that are basically supporting the war. They actually take a bunch of copper miners who are on strike and like dump them off in the desert, but I'm not going to go too much into that. But then there's like this idea of, and I'll talk about this a little more, the psychology of war, and I'll talk about this more in the next section, but we changed the name of hamburgers to like Liberty sandwiches. But this, we would never do that again. We have. In my lifetime, we've done this again. During the 2000s, France did not support us when we went into Iraq. Because they didn't see like there was necessary reason to invade in Iraq, because they didn't see any evidence of weapons of mass destruction, which, by the way, there weren't. I was working at Walmart, and people started saying instead of French fries, they said freedom fries. So the idea that people would rename food to like get back at a country they don't like, it's happened in my generation. So just know, changing hamburgers to Liberty burgers or Liberty sandwiches, not really out of the realm of the possibility. We're just a little bit like that. Psychology of war. And this is going to get all the way up to the Christmas truce, but let's get to the idea of how America, and this is true for every country out there, that they do this during war times, and it's almost a necessity in the sense that they need the whole country to back up this war effort. If you have the country fighting within, you don't get the full force of the United States or the full force of France or whatever country that's doing this. So you need people on your side, and how they do this is through the psychology of war and through the use of propaganda. Now, let me show you some stuff. Some stuff, it's not a big deal. You can't really tell too much, but this says, like, save a loaf of bread for the week for the war effort. This is the idea of that Lever Food, Fuel, and Drug Act, that you're trying to preserve food here so we can send it to the troops out there. That makes sense. There's nothing really wrong with that. This one, kind of on one day, it talks about Uncle Sam stomping out the Kaiser. It has like this big boot that's the United States stomping out the Kaiser. Not too big, not too inflammatory, not too intense. But then we get to this type of stuff. This is the stuff that really starts resonating. And this is the portraying Germans as this non-human-like creature. And they're using these propaganda pieces. And you'll see some, if you come back to my room, they're right next to my desk. It's this demonstrating that Germans aren't human. And this demonstration of Germans aren't human makes it easier for you to kill, because if they're not human, then I'm not really taking a human life. Everything's all good. And then it's like the guilt trip. So this right here is a dad, and he's looking like towards the camera, if there was a camera. It's a cartoon, though. And there's one girl playing with soldiers on the ground, and the other girl is in daddy's lap, and she's like, "What did you do during the Great War?" And he looks like he hasn't gone to war, because he looks like, oh, nuts, I can't tell my kids that I fought. And it's a guilt trip. This is the biggest war of our time. What did you do? It's a way of making sure men know that if you're going to be manly, you better go out there and fight this war, even if you disagree with the circumstances of it. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but it gives you an idea of this control, okay? This control of how we view things. Matter of fact, there was censorship that was going on, preventing things against the war from going out. We talked about the Sedition Acts and the Espionage Act. These are preventing people from actually voicing their opinion against the war at the time. And understand that's different than nowadays, because during the war after 9/11, when we went to Iraq, there was fleets of protest of us going out to Iraq. And there was no Espionage Act arresting these folks. So just understand, things have changed a little bit. People can argue for good or for the better, but at the end of the day, back then you had the psychology of war, of trying to make sure people believe the war effort is true, and we need to do it no matter what your political beliefs are. We need to support this war. Of dehumanizing Germans is common, and this is going to happen throughout warfare. This isn't just true for World War I. This is true for World War II. This is true for the Vietnam War. This is just true throughout. It's dehumanizing somebody from the other side because troops, believe it or not, are going to have a hard time killing other people. It's almost against our grain, generally speaking, to kill somebody else. But if you can make them seem less human than those people shooting those bullets, have less of an impact on their psychology that they're actually killing them. So this idea of hate the Hun comes out. But as the video you're going to watch on throughout this week called the Christmas Truce, you're going to see this deconstruction, this taking away of this dehumanization of the other side, because they start realizing the people on the other side are just like me. They may speak a different language and they come from a different country, but they're still humans and they have the same interests as I do. Matter of fact, sometimes in the case of the Christmas Truce, they know the other person on the other side. They knew them. They knew their family members. They knew their friends. They knew their barber, whatever. And they start realizing they are human, and it makes it harder to shoot them later on. This is a huge impact on the psychology of this war here. And it's just true generally. If you view your opponent as just like you, it is very hard to pull that trigger. But if you view them as a monster, as it's being portrayed in propaganda about Germans, it's a lot easier to pull that trigger. So, and this just goes into how war efforts sometimes are made, is that enemy has to be more than just a human. They have to actually be less than just a human. They have to be non-human. All right, let's get to it. So, end of the war. How do we get there? So, eventually, the Germans sue for peace, and then the war conversation takes place. There's three things that you need to know about this. One, you need to know about the 14 points. The 14 points comes from Woodrow Wilson, and I'm going to attach in this email or in this Google Slides, whatever, I'm going to attach the 14 points document that I want you to read. Because it's really not that long, it's 14 points. But it goes through this idea of how to maintain peace after World War I, the largest war in the history of the world up until this point. And Woodrow Wilson's goal is to make sure this never happens again. So these 14 points are basically 14 suggestions that will keep us out of the war, and this is about not just us, everybody out of the war. It's maintaining safe waters that people can trade in. It's maintaining sovereignty within nations. It's also talking about the lands of Europe after the war and how the lands need to be broken up and how this needs to happen in a peaceful way to make sure everybody on each side feels like they got a square in the deal. So read the 14 points on your own, because you're going to need to know that, but just know the 14 points. It's Woodrow Wilson's idea to keep peace, and we'll see that a lot of it doesn't work out because we get a World War II. So there we go. So anyway, there's a peace conference in Paris, and the Treaty of Versailles will be eventually signed. I'll talk about that in a minute. But there's also idea, this other genius idea from Woodrow Wilson and others, of a League of Nations. Think of like the United Nations we have today, but back then it would be the League of Nations. And the League of Nations idea was to make a group of countries across the world that would be a team to make sure that peace is preserved. And because you would have strength in numbers, the likelihood of peace would be better because if you have 14 people, 14 countries, 10 countries, 7 countries on this team, if another country wants to fight them, they know they have to fight the other group. So they're less likely to start something, right? The problem is the League of Nations doesn't secure two major countries. One, doesn't secure Russia. Two, it doesn't secure the United States, which I'll talk about in just a minute. Another thing they didn't have is a standing army. So without an actual army or people to enforce their ideas, it's more of just a wonderful thought and not anything you can do practically. So what happens is it really doesn't do the thing what it needs to do, and that's preserve peace, because obviously we get a World War II. Why doesn't the United States join? This is something to write down. The United States doesn't join for a couple reasons. Congress doesn't want to give out more power to anybody else. They want to keep it. And if making a League of Nations that can make decisions, that can make Congress make decisions, not something they want. But this is the one to write down. One of the clauses in the League of Nations contract, if you will, it's alliance thing, is that if one person in the League of Nations, one country in the League of Nations were to get in a fight or be attacked, all nations in the League of Nations must come to their rescue. And the United States government was like, yeah, we don't want that. Because if you have a country that is constantly causing conflicts or putting themselves in a position to be attacked, then we're going to have to jump in and help them every time they do this. And they did not want to get involved with that, so that's why they're like, nope, not doing the League of Nations. Finally, the Treaty of Versailles, write this down, ends the war. which really just pushes World War II. Really what the Treaty of Versailles was a 20-year ceasefire. Like, we won't shoot, you don't shoot, we'll all be fine. And then we do. We start shooting again. And that's not good. Not good for anyone. About 30-year ceasefire. So the reason why Treaty of Versailles failed is, one, let's go through all the table. Italy joins us during the war. And when I say us, I mean like the Allied side, the side that's UK, France, Russia. Russia gets out eventually, and us. They eventually join us to fight the war. And they're there at the deliberation and the conversation about what's happening during the Treaty of Versailles, but they're not given the respect that they believe that they're owed. They're not given the land that they thought they were promised. So this makes Italy upset, and you're going to find out Italy is going to be one of the countries that we have to fight during World War II. Japan, who fought on our side, and I say our side, I mean like the Allied side. Japan, who fought on our side, are completely ignored during these conversations. And guess who are we fighting? Guess who do we fight in World War II? In Japan. So these two are like really big things to pay attention to. Now you're like, what about that third country, Germany? Germany was not allowed into the peace conference, and the Treaty of Versailles was a smack in the face, punch in the gut, and then like flick of the ear against Germany. It's, you're going to pay us a lot of money. You're going to take ownership for everything that happened in World War I, and you can't build an army anymore. I know you guys are a proud nation that has a really cool military and all. You don't get one anymore. So we took away their favorite toy. We took away their money, making them go into a depression. We basically said, take away your pride by saying you did everything wrong and we did everything right. This is not going to sit well. So now when I say we, I mean like the group of people that went there during the side that we were on, not like us, the people today, but like the people we were on back then. We upset Italy, who becomes an enemy in World War II. We upset Japan, who becomes an enemy in World War II. And we upset Germany, who becomes an enemy in World War II, that become a triple threat against the world. It doesn't give them the right to kill and start wars, but I'm just saying, unintended consequences. If we would have treated Italy better, if we would have treated Japan better, and if we would have just maybe not blamed Germany for everything and maybe not have put them in a severe depression after this, maybe we could have avoided World War II, but we didn't. So what ifs? What ifs are fun to talk about, because maybe next time we can do it a little bit differently. So those are the three things you know in this section. The Treaty of Versailles ended the war. We didn't join the League of Nations because we didn't want to have to fight a war if somebody else got into a conflict. We had to back them up. And the 14 points, which like Woodrow Wilson's brainchild, it was the thing that he thought was going to stop future wars and eventually keep peace in the world. It didn't come to fruition because countries didn't really agree to a lot of it. So World War I, we did it! Watch it, read it, learn all the stuff that you need to know, be ready for the quiz and test. Peace.